Hi, welcome back to Happily in the Middle. Thanks for joining me here today. Today I'm going to talk to you all about the sentence frame. Now, the sentence frame is one of my favorite tools to use in the classroom to support my English learners. I think it's one of the most important supports that we use as English teachers in the classroom. Now, I want to start out by saying that I understand. I understand that when you are first introduced to the sentence frame that it really feels like you're doing the work for your students. I remember being a new teacher and it just drove me crazy when I was expected to use the sentence frames because I felt like I was doing all the work for my students. But what I've learned over the last few years is that I am not doing the work for my students. I am supporting them in their language development. And over time, as with any scaffold you use in the classroom, you slowly step back that level of support until your students gain the independence to be able to do it themselves. So, what is the sentence frame? The sentence frame at its basic level is simply a sentence where you start the sentence and the students have to finish it. Now, as the teacher, again, it feels like you're doing all the work because you're writing half the sentence for them, but it really depends on how you're using the sentence frame. So for me in my classroom, when I introduce a sentence frame, I talk about that targeted academic language in the sentence frame, and I point it out to my students. We've done lessons in the beginning of the year where we talked about academic language in the classroom and everyday English we use outside of the classroom. And so I really support and encourage and even push my students to use that academic language in the classroom. So when they get a sentence frame, they understand that there is academic language in there that they are expected to use, and then they must engage with the content that I've been teaching them and they must provide an answer. Now, it kind of reminds me of a student, or I guess you could say a child who's learning to tie their shoes. If you have a kid who's only ever had Velcro or slip on shoes and they've never seen anyone tie their shoe and they've never been shown how to do it or taught how to do it or seen a video of how to do it, and you give them a pair of shoes and say, tie your shoes, and then you give them an F because they didn't know how to do it, doesn't really seem fair, does it? And that's kind of how the sentence frame is in my idea, I guess, in my head, is that when I am introducing students to academic language, I cannot make the assumption that they have used academic language before or that they have been exposed to a lot of academic language, and that I can't expect my students to all perform linguistically at the same level because we all come from different backgrounds. Some students have been exposed to a lot of higher tier vocabulary. Some students have been very limited on that. So if I'm punishing my students by giving them an F because they're not writing as well as I think they should just because they're in sixth grade, that doesn't seem really fair. So as with any kid who's learning to tie their shoe, usually we'll have an adult or an older kid will sit down and they will show them how to tie it and how to do the loops and pull it through, and they'll show them again and again and again, and then they'll go slow and they'll talk about how to do it, and then they'll have the student who's learning try it, or the kid who's learning try it, go slow and talk, and they might make up a song for it and have them practice tying their shoes, and it'll be messy and not very good for a while, and then eventually they learn how to do it themselves and they don't need to watch someone or have someone do it for them. The sentence frame is kind of similar. The purpose of the frame is to get students to practice and be exposed to that academic language. If they've never been exposed to it, then they don't know how to use it. And it's our job to show them how to use the academic language. We're the grown up showing them how to tie their shoes. And I promise you, over time, you will see your students using that academic language or that sentence structure that you're trying to teach them. They will gain that independence and they will start doing it on their own. Just before winter break happened, I was really excited because I had a couple of students in the writing zone of Read 180 without any help from me, unprompted from me, without sentence frames from me, apply a sentence frame we had been practicing for introducing text evidence, and he did it correctly, and he used his quotation marks, and he did a citation, and it was beautiful. And it was really cool to see that independence start to grow in these two or couple of, there's I think there's like four or five, these couple of students who had started using the sentence frame themselves. So I do know that in the beginning it feels like you're doing all the work, but I promise you, you're not. All right, so what is a sentence frame? So again, the sentence frame can look like this, where you start the sentence and then it's blank line, and the student must complete the sentence. A sentence frame that is a little bit higher in the level of support, maybe for a lower level English learner, could be a sentence where they have to fill in the word. So we call this a close sentence. And so the student would read the sentence and then they would have like a bank of words at the bottom or somewhere on the side. They would have to pick the correct word to put into the sentence. Now, again, that feels like, oh my goodness, I'm doing all the work for my students, but think about that student that you're serving with that type of sentence frame. They may know very little English. They may have been exposed to very little academic language in their native language. And so by giving them that type of sentence frame, you are able to assess a couple of different things. Do they understand the question? Do they understand the sentence? Do they understand the word that fits in that sentence? So if you have different words like nouns and verbs, you are assessing, do they understand the grammar of that structure of the sentence? And then at the basic level, you're assessing, do they understand the meaning of the word that they've chosen to put in the sentence? So for a newer student who is emerging in their English development, that might be the level of support they need. And as a teacher, you can watch once they are getting those correct all the time, then you're going to step back that support and you're going to make them work a little bit harder to choose more words to fill in that sentence, or even leave it blank in the end, or have the student have to find or choose the word that you've been studying that would fit into that sentence. You can really push the sentence frame to go all the way into essay writing or paragraph writing as well. There are tons of resources for paragraph writing, for compare and contrast or similarities and differences, and the sentence frames are just kind of there and the students will fill in the blank, and then you can use that for essays as well to extend it. Now, what I recommend for you is that you always talk about the academic language. If you don't talk about the language, then it is very likely the students will just go through the motions and you will be doing some of the work for them. But in my classroom, I really make it a point to point out and emphasize that academic language they're using in the classroom. And I remind them, this is our academic language. When you have a discussion, we want to use these kinds of words. Or I will remind them and talk about grammar in the sentences and how they are structured and how we can change our inflectional endings, ed or ing. And depending on where it goes in the sentence, we're going to need to add a helping verb or not add a helping verb. Or what I really like to do is have students share their sentences with partners, or share individually in the class and have like 6 or 7 different students share, and then they will get to hear how students change those sentence frames, and that we don't all need to have the exact same response as long as the answer makes sense and is correct. And so it gives students an opportunity to be exposed to a lot of different type of language. For example, in my classroom, because I teach Read 180, I have this really handy tool. So if you are a Read 180 Universal user, you can find this yourself in the resources. And I printed it on cardstock, so it's a little bit stronger, not so flimsy, and it's hole punch because my students put this in their reading folders. Now, it has a blue section, your language for academic discussions at the top here, and then the orange section down at the bottom, language for collaboration. So when I have students share their answers out loud with each other, I will often say, okay, everyone take your finger, put it on the blue section. Excellent. Is everyone on the blue? Check your partner. Do you have your finger on the blue? Awesome. All right, now everyone put your finger on number 5. Number 5 is restating ideas. We have a really big problem in 6th grade with pretending like we're listening, but not really listening to our partners. And so I have my students restate each other's ideas, and I want to give them a sentence frame because a lot of times they just want to take the easy way out. And so this is giving them an opportunity to apply some academic language in a respectful way. Another one that I will also do is having students elaborate on their ideas or sharing their own ideas. Now, in the language for collaboration, I also have students when they give ideas or decide on ideas they want to share. And so again, these sentence frames are really helpful because it gives my students an opportunity to be challenged to go beyond a basic level of discussion. So I recommend that if you're a Read 180 user, you um, print this out for your students and put it in their folder so that they have it and that they can easily access this. Every day we use this chart, and it's really wonderful because I have seen my students over time start using these sentence frames on their own, and they're really applying that language on their own in discussion. So another one that I have for you is called A Tool to Scaffold Instruction for English Learners. This one comes from the Los Angeles County Office of Education. This was given to me by someone in my school district. So I don't know really much about where it comes from or how you can get it, but maybe you can go to their website. I'm not sure. So up here you can see, I think this is like our Bloom's taxonomy triangle. So remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. So you're going to have sentence frames to help guide your students in all of those depth of knowledge levels, DOK levels we want to take them through. And it's super helpful. So this first one here is DOK level 1. These are questions or sentence frames for helping students remember knowledge. And so every content area has some basic skills that students just need to know. You just need to know what the parts of speech are. And that's just a simple thing you need to remember at a basic level. What are the 8 parts of speech? They are blank, 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 and blank. So at the basic level, there are some skills we do need to remember, but we can provide student support in answering. So here's a really basic level question. This top one here says, can you show the events of the story on this story chart? So that's this question up here. This is a remembering question. Can you basically retell what happened? And so to give them support in answering that, I have a first blank was blank, second blank was blank. And so I could either do first Johnny was blank, second Pony Boy was blank, third Soda Pop was blank. So I could give them that level of support where I put the characters' names in there and I'm just wanting the students to recall the events of the story. Or if my students are more advanced, I can leave that blank and have them filling in who the characters were in this story. But maybe I need to go up my DOK level. So this is a level 2, and I here can have my students identify what is the most important ideas in this passage, and their response would be the most important idea in the passage is blank. So I can keep going up to DOK level 3. This is my evaluating. And so you can just see how it takes you. Here are some questions. And then on the side is the sentence frame to support the student. And down below is a really helpful part of this chart. Down here tells me about evaluating emerging students. So these are our newer English learners. Expanding students, these are our students kind of in the middle. And then our bridging students are students who are more advanced and are closing in on becoming proficient in the English language at their grade level. And so what I can do is look here of how I can support them. This one here suggests for my emerging students, what I can do is split my page for note taking. So I could have them work in pairs or work in groups to take notes, and that would support my emerging students. I can, for my expanding students, I could have them do split page note taking with simplified text. And then here, bridging, I could use all strategies used for the lower levels, but with less support or less scaffolding. Maybe they have to do it by themselves. Or maybe instead of a group, they're doing it in partners. However you think that would best support your students. And it just gives us really nice ideas of how to support them. So numbered heads together, a learning log with a double entry journal, graphic organizers with simplified text. All of these are tools you can use to support your students. I really love this. I use this all the time in my classroom to support my students, but also get ideas of how I can better support them. I have students who range in their English ability levels all the way from emerging students all the way up to advanced proficient students or students who are approaching proficiency in the classroom. And so I really have to scaffold and differentiate that instruction for all my students to help them achieve that success. Now, I know it's kind of crazy to think about how do I differentiate instruction for all of my students in the classroom? So how am I going to give that individual level of support to all those students? Well, there's a couple different things you can do. You can put up on a PowerPoint at a really simple level 2 different sentence frames and color code them. One is red, one is blue, or one is pink, one is purple, whatever you want to do. And then you can require that partner A does the pink one, partner B does the orange one, and then you can switch, or you could have the students choose whichever one they want to use in their discussion or their writing. A lot of students will gravitate towards the more challenging one because they want to be challenged, and a lot of students will gravitate towards the easier one because they want an easier way out, or that's the level of support that they need. But again, don't forget, we need to talk about the academic language in the sentence frames and point that out to students. Don't just give them the frame and expect them to use it and just acquire the knowledge. We really want to point that out to them and explain why we're practicing it. And this does not have to take long. It's like not even like 30 seconds. You read the sentence frame and say, don't forget, we're using that academic word opinion today. So in my opinion, and that's as long as it really needs to take. You can go more in depth with it if you would like to, but I don't think you always need to. Another way you can support your students is by, this one's a little bit more tedious, it takes more work, but printing out different assignments for your students and labeling them with the level of English support. I've done that with some of my students, a lot of times with graphic organizers. Some students just really need more support, and I will do that for a handful of students. Another thing that you can do is if you are a Google Classroom user, you can create an assignment very easily in Google Docs, and then you can share it with particular students. So it's all totally up to you and the level of work that you want to do. Now you can Google sentence frame ideas and you will find them all over the internet. There are tons of sentence frames out there to help support you. Now, before we go, I do want to just remind you that the sentence frame is for everybody and that you can use a sentence frame to support your emerging students, or you can use a sentence frame to support your advanced students. It's really the level of academic language that you are applying in that sentence frame that your students are going to benefit from. So if you have some really high performing students and you want to push them and challenge them to do more academic writing, then you just choose some more higher tier academic vocabulary and you have them apply and practice that. Now remember, the sentence frame is all about showing and teaching students how to use academic language. If they've never been exposed to it, then they don't know how to use it, and it's our job to show them how to use that academic language. And I promise over time they will gain that independence in using the academic language. Don't forget to hit subscribe. My next video is all about how to use visuals in the classroom with your students. These are things like anchor charts and Realia and Big Books and all different visual tools that you use in the classroom. If you've noticed, I talk with my hands a lot and I wish that I didn't. It drives me crazy, but I've taught English learners for my entire career. And so it's just kind of ingrained into me now to use my hands and big expressions on my face. That's part of visuals as well for students. So don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss that one, and have a great day.